Morning everybody. Small crew today, only got a dozen up, so that's okay. We'll go with the show anyway, so it's not as if we're going to close it off. But yeah, so good morning and welcome to a cool Sunday. We've had lots of rain during the week and it looks like we're going to have another dose during the week. So yeah, busy in the workshop. So today, going to be all over the shop again today. Remember I said last week we had all of this space around us here, and I sort of get lost in it because there's too much space. But anyway, today we're going to be on, we're going to work on the bandsaw, we're going to work on the drop saw, we'll do a little bit of drilling, we'll do a bit of routing. There's all sorts of things that we're going to be doing. Now, what I said to you last week was, whenever you're making something, to always make demo models. Well, I do anyway. It's up to you. Some of you don't have to, but I generally make little demo models of the things that I'm going to construct. And that way, at least I get things in some sort of order. And that was the little demo model that I made for just doing the rails and doing the mortars and tenon joints. I've chamfered off a corner, I've done a little bit of extra stuff to that piece, but it was just a little short piece. It was to work out how to use my equipment properly and just to make sure that it was all working in order before I started the job. There's no point in starting a job and having no equipment or the equipment not working properly. So the idea is to go through and just do some demo stuff and then sort your machinery out. So anyway, I ended up, got back into, made another model, but this time what I did was I put together all the componentry of each of the legs. So we're going to use this fancy little wheel here with a brake on it, and I have to make a little pad for it for the bottom of the leg. Now the reason I make the pad for it is because through screwing just a couple of little screws into the end grain, it doesn't work very well. It doesn't hang on to the grain because it's the wrong way around. So what I do is I make a little pad, and this is what the pad looks like. It's just this cute little thing that I put together. The size of the platform is exactly the same size as the leg itself, so it's exactly the same size as that bit. So it's just a continuation with a little bead on it. And the reason I do that is because the grain on the piece of timber is now running across the piece of timber, or it could go this way or that way, it doesn't matter which way you put it. Given that this is going to be painted and none of that grain system is going to be seen, the screws actually hold better into something that goes through the side of the grain rather than to the end of the grain, right? So that there's no chance of it breaking out and falling off. So it's also a good time to add a little bit of detail to the leg and make it a little bit more interesting rather than just having a boring old foot with just an empty leg on the end of it. So that's what the demo. Now, because this is not going to have a front rail on it, here's my little drawing. Because this is not going to have a front rail going across here, this is going to be quite unstable considering it's got legs, it's got wheels on it. So what I have to do is I have to run a corner brace across the corner of each of those to actually give it a bit more support. So I'm going to make one of those today and show you how to do that. So the various things I'll talk about towards the end of the show, about detail and so forth. But the first thing I want to do is show you how I set up to make the rails. Now, last week I made a rail. I went through it really quickly. I didn't actually explain myself very well, and people are going, oh, can you do that again? And I thought, okay, I'll make another rail. So Today what we're going to do is we're going to make the rail, and these are the parts here we've got that I have to make. So I've got to make a rail, same as that, only it's going to have a step in it. I'm going to make a corner brace. Now the corner brace has got pocket holes, screw holes in it, and that's over there, so we're going to be using that. And then I'm going to make the other pad. Now these are all the parts. Before I started, I cut all the parts, I gave them all a bit of a sand, made them all look and feel a bit right. And then now we're going to build them all. The tenon cutter that I'm using, this is our tenon cutter to make the rail. I already have that set up in here. Now when I set it up, I cut my tenon material and then worked out where it was going to fit into the mortise, right? And then set the height according to how high I wanted my shoulder. Now normally that shoulder is 1/3. Usually when you do a tenon, you break your timber down into thirds, so you have 1/3 of tenon and 1/3 this side, 1/3 the other side. Normally that's what you would do, but for this case I want a bit more strength in it because, like I said, there's no front rail in it and it needs to have a bit of strength in it, so I don't want to take too much strength away from the timber by cutting away 2/3 of the material. So I've only got a short shoulder in there. Now what I've done is I've set the height of my tenon cutter here to that height, and then I've worked out the distance I've needed from the end of the board to where it meets the leg. Okay, so that's your depth of my tenon. Sorry, the depth of my mortise, right? That depth is set on my bench. I'll get rid of all of this stuff off the bench so that you can see.
Can you turn the table around a little bit, Cole?
Yeah. And so what I've done is I've set my...
Terrific, thank you.
I've set my fence. I'll leave in the leg just a second. I've set my fence with a stop on the end here, so that what I can do is I can move the fence back and forth, and I know that when I get to the stop I've actually gone the correct distance for... There's my leg. The correct distance for cutting my tenon. Okay, so because I had to do 3 long rails and 4 short rails, if you set something up so that you just have to go through and do the whole lot rather than having to measure, mark, cut, all that sort of stuff, and get things wrong, get things right, do it the way you like to do it, by setting a machine up or this equipment up like that, it means I've got it right every single time and they'll all be the same. So that's the important thing as to why you would do little demo things where you make sure everything fits nice. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut this rail. So the first thing you do is build the rail. Now I don't want it to blow out the back, so a bit of a push block, something that's sacrificial. It's just a piece of MDF. So I'm only going to do a half cut to start with. So ears on, everybody. I've done half the cut. You can see how much dust came out of there, so I'll just go and turn the dust extractor on. Okay, let's go back again, have another go. So I'm going to do both ends of the board. Okay, so now what you can see is I've got a nice flat surface. It's only half the distance I need. So reset. So now I have two pieces of timber exactly the same, and they've both got rails. Now in the top of the leg, this is my leg, you'll see I've got a little step in the top, so I need to cut that out. Okay, so this will go straight into here. So that fits in there quite nicely. And then I just need to make this one here, I just need to take the step out there. So I've set my bandsaw up, and here again, setting up a piece of equipment is ideal. So I've got my bandsaw set at the right distance, and I'm going to just take a small cut. Again, we have three rails that we have to do this to. The bottom rail doesn't have the step in it. So I've got three bottom rails and I've got three top rails. The top rails all have to have exactly the same cut. So it's a good idea to set the machine up before you start them all, and then it's just a matter of going through and cutting. Normally I would have a stop on the other side. And now I have that fitting in there perfectly. So that'll work well. And then of course the other one goes in the bottom. It's a matter of popping that in. Right in. or in there and won't do it at the moment because we're not going to fit it together because we've got other parts to make. So that will fit in there. This one's all right. Okay. So we can put that aside because we've got all our rails made. Now, to finish this side, I'm turning the subtractor off. Like I said, we're going to be all over the shop today, so we'll just take it as it comes. Okay, now I don't need to make any more legs or any more rails or anything like that, so what I'm going to do is now start doing all the other little bits and pieces around the work. So I had to make corner braces. Now the corner braces are just another piece of material. There's a couple of ways you can put these on. So the corner brace has to go across here, like so. Alright, and of course, sorry, this way. Goes in that way because it goes onto the rail and it'll go from one rail to the other across the corner. So there'll be a rail out here, a rail out there, and the corner brace. So it's got 45-degree angle cuts on the corners and somewhere to screw the holes in. Now to make things easy, what I have is I have a Creed pocket hole drill. Okay. So when you cut your piece of material, now the one thing that I haven't done with this is the dust port on here needs an attachment. Now I don't have an attachment for it at this stage, so I improvise a little so that I can fit my fest tool, and that means a little bit of tape, like I said, all over the shop today. So a little piece of tape. This just makes life easy, particularly when I have to do a whole lot of them. So a little bit of tape goes onto my dust port, like so. And I know you can get them, just that I don't have that equipment at the moment. And I'll just take my dusty in place. Looks a bit dodgy, looks a bit how's your father, but it does the job. And I will have to get myself a piece of equipment, a bit of equipment that will actually hook up to this thing. Okay. Shift a few things. The first thing I do with my piece of timber, and this is the piece of timber that I'm going to use, is exactly the same size, 19mm by the width of the rail. You can put them in this way if you like, but I prefer to have them vertical like that. Just the way I like to do things. So the first thing I'm going to do is drill a couple of holes in. Set up the drill. Turn on the dusty. So as you can imagine, all I've done is just, I've done one piece and I've drilled my little holes in it. Now it's a matter of cutting the 45 degrees on the ends. I have a piece of equipment to do that as well. I tend to try to make life easy because if you're going to do 4 or 5 of them, you need something set up so that it doesn't want to play. As you can see, it's quite difficult to get that out of there. This up here. Now my 45 degrees on the drop saw. And mate, because I have this platform, you may have seen me in the past. I've got a number of different fences that I use for various tasks that I do around the workshop. This is another one. Okay, so it's a big piece of wood now. And it's just a matter of cutting a 45-degree angle on the end of that. Put that in place. Clamp it down. And then it's just a matter of make sure you do the right side. 45 degrees. There's my 45 degrees with the pocket holes in it. Do the other side. Now to check if it's 45 degrees, it's just a matter of doing that, and you can see that's actually a perfect 45 degree angle. So if you have that on both sides, because you're going to put your table together square, you're going to have perfect corner braces. Okay, so there's the corner braces made. I've made the rails, so I'll put that over there with the rest of the bits. The next thing to make is the pad on the bottom. Right? So that's what we're going to make now. So that's the last little piece of this jigsaw puzzle before we start looking at decoration. So let's get this here. So I hope you're keeping up with it. I've got stuff everywhere.
I think it'll make more sense next week when you assemble the table.
I think so, Pam, you're right.
Yeah. It's a bit disjointed at the moment, but it all has a purpose.
Yep. So actually just putting all the parts together. Now, the table is still not flat. That's better. And I do move it from where it was flat. Okay, so the router bit that I'm going to use is my rounding over bit. Now there's a number of different sizes. If you've purchased our cutter kit, you will have purchased a cutter kit that has that router bit in it. That's the 506. This is the 508. Okay, so I think a 508.
Yeah.
But there's a difference in the size. This one's a little bit bigger. That's the one I'm going to use.
Just put
on
on the
here.
table. Put on the table for a moment so we can compare the heads.
So if you look at those, you can see that they're different sizes. This one here is the one that we use for most of our box making. Occasionally I'll use that, but not very often. And you can purchase those from LARK TOOL or any reputable hardware store that actually carries LARK TOOL bits. Not every hardware store does carry them. So all I'm going to do now is just set according to what I've already done here. Now I went through a process of actually building these and I just want to set this to exactly the same size. Now one of the things you'll find with this is once you cut one side out of it, you then don't have support for the bearing on the actual diameter of the piece of timber, because you're taking away a lot of the material that's actually supporting the bearing. You can see that now the material actually sits under the bearing. So in this case what we need is a fence. And so I have a fence that sort of, it's a multi-use fence. I set the fence against the bearing. The bearing's parallel with the fence. And that way at least I've got some support for the material as it goes across the just need a little bit of a throaty frog in the throat. Okay, so now it's just a matter of cutting through. Shoot that off. That's really nice. A little pusher. Okay, just making sure I don't blow out the back here. Ears on. Okay, you'll notice what I did there when I cut that. I cut across the grain first, just so that if any damage occurred to it, I would, I'm not too concerned about the burn marks, but I don't want any blowout, so I didn't want anything to sort of tear off it. So cut across the grain first, and then you cut along the grain second. Because if there is any damage that comes off it, well then you can take it off when you cut along the grain. So I'm just tidying up the edges. I'm not too concerned too much about it because it's going to be painted, so it's not going to be seen, and that's why I'm using radiata for starters. I'm not a big fan of radiata, but when it's a painted project and it's, the timber itself is not going to be seen, utilitarian bit. That's what it's going to look like. So what I need to do now, and these are the same thing, so what I need to do now is drill these holes. Right? So ruler and pencil. The holes are 10 millimeters in from the edge. So if I just draw a line across the middle. Now I don't want to do the diagonals. Somebody will be saying, oh, just run a line across the diagonals. I don't want them to go diagonally across the piece because that's where the wheels are going to fit diagonally across. So that's why we need to have these holes, as you can see, square around the hole, around the pad. And I put 4 in because it just makes it a little bit stronger. It's going to be glued as well, so 10 mil. Okay, so over to the drill press. Now the drill bit that I have in here, unplug and plug myself in. The drill bit I have here has a little plastic platform. I have a few of them here, I'll show you one. It's actually a countersinking bit. This is what it looks like. So you can pick these up, and it's got a little plastic ring around here, that's that red bit, and that's, as you can see, it's loose, it's on bearing. And got a countersinking bit, and of course the drill bit. Now you can change the drill bit anytime you like. To change the drill bit, it's just there's a grub screw in there. It's just a matter of undoing the grub screw and then taking the drill bit out and replacing it. To adjust the depth of your countersink, there's these 2 thumb screws at the top here, or platforms, and you can screw this one down. You can see the distance in here is actually changing. And that will give you your depth of drilling. And then it's just a matter of winding the lock back into place.
That is so clever.
And that's locked in, and that will only drill to that depth. Right. Now you can get bigger ones, smaller ones. I have others that have got the big yellow platforms on them. This is just a little small one that I use for my little work. So I've got one here already set up with the correct drill bit in it. And gives me the perfect depth. I've already set the depth. I know exactly where it has to be. Again, that's because I made all the demo ones, did all the demo work, and then coming through and doing the final mock-up, or the final fit, that gives me my 2 pieces. Now, when I fit the wheel on, the wheel's going to cover all of those holes. And I want the wheel platform to be square with the piece of timber. Okay, so that's why I don't have the holes in the corners. I have them across from each other. Okay, so that bit's made. So now it comes to some of the other bits. Now, I've got all the parts. They're all sitting over there. Now it comes to doing some of the decoration. Now, this table that I'm building here now is not something that's sort of going to be stuck out on view for when people come to my home. So it's more a utilitarian piece. So I don't need a whole lot of fancy little bits and pieces, but in that saying that, if you want to build the table with the same sort of construct, you probably want to need to put some sort of detail on it. Now, lots of people like detail. Pam's not a big fan of it, so it's not going to have much detail on it. It's just going to be very, very plain, very simple and usable. So basically that's where we're going with it, and that's why you haven't seen any detail at all on any of the parts apart from the bottom of that pad. The other detail that I'm going to put on it for this one here is all I'm going to do is chamfer off the corners of the legs so they're not sharp, so that when you bump them, you don't hurt yourself or you don't damage the piece. So to do the chamfer, we have a chamfer bit. Table is still not right. There we go. So here's my leg, and I've sanded it, but you'll find that you see little parts of it there where things have chipped off. You know, it's just from bumping it, from moving it around the workshop, and by taking that corner off, or each of the corners off, you avoid a lot of that, so it doesn't happen. Now, on my demo, I've already chamfered one of the corners, and that's the one that I use to adjust the router bit for all of the rest of the bits. I've got it the correct distance, and it comes almost into the line, so that when I put my, I think that's the one, might be the wrong one. When I put that in there, you can see where the line is, it almost touches the rail. So a little bit of detail involved in that, but that's about all. So I'm going to use that to set my router bit. The importance of demos. Spot on. I just feel it scraping on the piece of timber. So it's that size. So all I have to do now is take off the sides of this piece. And then we'll get into some of the other detail that we tend to do. Now, I didn't think we'd get through a lot of that stuff, so we might be able to get the detail done, and we'll talk about actually assembly. We'll have a look at how it assembles. I think that's what everybody's looking for, is to see it assembled. Okay, so with the legs, what I don't want to do is I don't want the bearing to sort of skip into the holes here. So when I do my when I run the bearing along it, I'll run along where there's no impediments or no holes or anything like that. So this one will get done along there. So there's nothing along there, there's no mortises. Gears on. And so there, have all the corners off. Now I sanded that earlier, so that basically now ready for assembly and paint. Okay, detail. Now, this is where you can break out. Let's get this little piece here. There's a couple of things. So this is what the thing looks like when you're standing it up. So it's got a wheel on it, got our little bead on the bottom, and it's very plain from there up. So what do? I've chamfered the corners on our table. That's all I've done, and that's all it's going to get. I'm not going to get any more. But some of the detail that you'll see, particularly on French provincial type furniture, is you'll see little beads and little carvings and all sorts of different things on it to keep it in, because that in that French provincial look, that's the sort of thing that they used to do, and we tend to overlook a lot of that. So I'm just going to take this wheel off. I'm actually going to take the bead off as well, the platform. So that's what the platform looks like without the wheel on it. 4 screws. Now, the screws that I used in the platform were actually stainless steel. They're stainless steel decking screws. And as you can see, they're quite long. You can make them longer if you like. And they're posi drives. Okay, so they've got a square head on them, so you need a special drill bit to do that, or a special screwdriver. Being stainless steel, if it gets wet in the bottom of your table, it's obviously not going to rust out. Okay, so we'll put this together again in a minute, but first of all, what I want to do is I want to show you something that I've done on things in the past. Now, there's a drill bit called a router bit, called a drawing line router bit. This is what it looks like. Now, if you haven't seen one before, if you've walked around a house, often you find on architraves and beading of bits and pieces around windscreen windows, particularly the drop leaf windows, you'll find that that's been used, or something similar to that has been used to do the beading and the edging around the skirting boards and architraves and so forth. In furniture, it's probably not used so much. I've just found that it actually gives a nice little bit of detail to corners. Now, you saw I chamfered the other corner before when I did the corners on our legs. All I did was chamfer it. With this, what I can do is I can put a little bead along the edge, which adds a little bit of detail to your work. And so to do it, now what I've done here, I've set the router bit, the height of the router bit, the bottom of the cove is flush with the top of the table. Alright? And so this is what it will do for you. So ears on. So in this case here, what I would be doing if the rail is there, that's the outside of the leg, right? So I'll be doing this outside edge. So ears on. Now, when you look at a skirting board, that's what you probably see, is that bead along the skirting board or around a window sash, right? If we turn it over, ears on again. If we turn it over and do the other side, now we have this beautiful little curve or little bead fitted on the outside edge of the table. That looks really, really cute, particularly if you're going to do it on the bottom of a rail. So if you want to match up the rail, you can do it along the bottom of the rail as well. Just make that little bead on there. I'm not going to do it on this one because I'm going to add another piece on there that actually helps to sort of bring this piece into this piece as well. So that now matches up to this. So now you can link the rounded edge on that with the rounded edge on this. And if you do that on all four corners of the table, you only need the outside corners. You don't need to here. Can do it if you like, but that little corner cove is quite a nice little thing. Now, the bottom edge of this, now this is going to be painted. The bottom edge of that, I had a piece of timber here and I've put it down. Here we go. So the bottom edge of that, what I could do is add another piece, and this is what you do see in the French Provincial, is you'll see something that's added on like this, right? But the front edge of it is rounded over. Now it's just a piece of bit of maple, but what we can do is round that over, right? So let's do that. The router bit that I'm using for that is one of the router bits out of our kit. Bullnose bit. It's a TBM4 for those of you who haven't seen it before. Now, because this hasn't got a bearing on it, we're going to need the fence. There are 2 or 3 different sizes of this. Carby Tool have them. They're called a line drawing bit, or a drawing line bit, I think. Okay, so I'll set my height. Now this piece of timber is 7mm thick, which is the radius, the diameter of the cove in there. I need a fence. hope you're getting something out of this. It's not often, but quite often I get asked about, you know, what can you do to make it a little bit more fancy? Well, these are some of the things you can do to make it a little bit more fancy. Okay, so ears on. So what I have there is I have a nice little bead on the end of my piece of timber. So I have a step on it, and that step will line up with the edge of there. And so, actually it's the wrong way around, this way around. And so now you have a link between the rail and the leg and the platform, of course. And when you put all that together, now, okay, I've got two different coloured timbers there, but that doesn't matter because we're going to paint it. But it's just a matter of nailing that in place or screwing that in place so that you have this lovely little bead that goes along the bottom of the rail. And you can do that on all the rails if you like. They're just a couple of ideas that you can do working around here. The other ideas that people come up with, or people have, when I talk about different ideas, these are just simple ways of doing things to make things a little bit more fancy. The things that a lot of people say was, well, why don't you taper the leg? Why don't you put a curve on the rail? You can do that, but it takes a lot more work. To do the rails, you need to make yourself, if you want to shape the rails, you need to make yourself a template that you can use on the bandsaw if you have a bandsaw. If you haven't got a bandsaw, well then you've got to do it by hand. There it becomes a little bit more difficult. So that's just a couple of ideas. Just let me put some of this together so that you can see exactly how it looks. Here's my drill bits and things. And my screws. I'll just put a couple of screws in. Actually, you use these ones here just to show you what it looks like once it's all assembled. Drill bit. And so that's what you're going to end up with. Something looks a bit like that. Okay, you can see everything's now linked together with different shapes and different designs. Once you've got paint on that, no one's going to know the difference about what sort of timber's underneath all the paint. So it's just a matter of getting the shapes right when you're putting all things together. So basically that's it. That's what our table's going to, or your table could look like. So just little details make a difference. Okay, we've got a few minutes left. What I might to do is I might assemble two ends of the frame. I won't put the long rails in, but I'll do the two ends of the frame. I'll show you what that's going to look like. Actually, I won't do that. I'll leave you in suspense. We might call it quits there. I'll just show you all the bits that we've got. So there's the 3 rails. That's the 2 top ones, front and back. That's the lower back one. There's the 4 rails for the sides. There's 2 platforms, 2 corner braces, and 4 legs. We've got bits everywhere. Okay, so to assemble the table, this particular table, you probably need all of those parts. That will get the framework done, and of course we've got 4 of the feet. So next week, I'll keep you in suspense, next week I will assemble the table, put it all together, we'll glue it all up, and then we'll start looking at doing the top. Now the top is going to have a drop leaf on it, and we have to go through a process of actually hinging the drop leaf on it. So I'll have to have a look at that, and we'll just look at that simply. It's not going to be anything fancy. We're just going to keep it as simple as possible. The table itself is basically designed to sort of house the sewing machine, and when we're going to move it around anywhere, we just want a little bit of extra room on the end of it, so it can be pushed around the room wherever Pam wants to put it, and the table of it's just a little bit of something on the end of it. So what we have to do is we have to put the drop leaf on it, but also we have to have a mechanism, or some sort of mechanism, that will actually hold that in place, okay, and support it. Now, I've had a couple of ideas. A few people have given me some of their thoughts about how I should do it. We'll see what happens when the time comes. So that's it for today. I hope you got something out of today. It was all over the shop. I was back and forth and running all over this big space that I have, but I think I need it now. So I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so, and we'll catch you all again next week.